What's the creepiest thing a nice guy has ever done to you? Story 1. A shady nice guy offered to help me with my suitcase as I was walking down the stairs. I politely declined, but he insisted. He took my suitcase and wouldn't give it back, saying he would help take it to my bus. I kept telling him I was fine, but he ignored me. He sat me down on the bus and kept my suitcase in the aisle, forcing me to take the window seat. He kept offering to buy me alcohol, even though I wasn't allowed to drink at the time. And when I tried to get off the bus early, he insisted we take it to where he parked his car so he could drive me. I was terrified. Luckily, I had texted my uncle, who met us at the end of the bus line. He's in the Air Force, and the shady character couldn't give me my suitcase fast enough. I've been getting a lot of the same questions, so I'm going to answer them here. Why didn't I scream or make a scene? I was young and didn't know better. I do now, and if it happened to me today, I would do anything I had to get away. Was he a nice guy? No. He was definitely shady, but he kept repeating how nice he was being by carrying my suitcase. For years afterward, I told myself that maybe I was overreacting and he was just trying to be helpful. But after all your reactions, I've realized that I wasn't overreacting. He was a creepy guy, and I'm so grateful that my uncle came to pick me up. I can't imagine what could have happened if he hadn't. I think I only realized just how creepy it was a few years back when I was telling it to a friend. During the trip, I thought my biggest worry was that I was going to miss my flight. Now I realize how worse it could have been. Next time a nice guy offers to help you, just say, "No thanks, I'm allergic to creeps." Story 2. I was trying to leave a frat party one night, and the two guys guarding the closet claimed it was a house rule that girls had to give them their numbers to get their coats. I wasn't familiar with the place, and it was a narrow hallway tucked away from the rest of the party. The guys were bigger than me, drunk as heck, and kept trying to sweet-talk me into staying upstairs with them instead because they were so nice. Since they had been so nice to make sure no one stole our things at the party, they said we had to pay them back. One guy even said I could just flash him instead. I gave them my number, and when a guy started to text me, I only responded with Spider-Man memes until he gave up. I literally never saw them again. I was buzzed, it was late, the party was boring, and I just wanted to go home. I felt cornered. My purse with my room key, phone, and wallet was in the closet, as was my jacket, and it was 35 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And had also never been in a situation where a guy asked for my number and wouldn't take no for an answer. I'm older now and know better, as this was years ago. I also received my first ever sausage pic from this guy, and my response of, "My, that's cute," was our last interaction over text. I'm still not sure which of the two young men I was actually talking to. Story 3. The guy was probably ancient, older to have seen dinosaurs, older than dirt. He was super nice and calm, but no wasn't an answer for him. "Let me walk you to your car." I didn't drive. "You shouldn't walk alone. There are some crazies out there. I'm waiting for a friend." "I can walk you to their car. We're actually going to the restaurant there, 5 steps away. But I don't do strangers walking me to my car, especially this guy who insists on it. Come on, I can walk you to your car, and if anyone tries to stop you, I've got a 12 gauge in my truck. I've used it on so many people before. I'm not getting out of my car. I'm waiting for a friend. I know how handcuffs are used as well. I don't care. Leave me alone. Don't you want to know?" "Not really. You use the cuffs on the feet, rope to tie up the hands. I've done that once or twice. My friend just went to the restaurant. Goodbye." The guy used another entrance of the restaurant to come in and stand behind me as I was telling the host about the situation. He and another big dude walked me to my car after old guy left. I drove home with 911 typed into my phone. I also didn't drive home immediately because someone followed me. I quickly turned off, drove to a well-lit public area, turned off all my lights, and sat in the car until the car that drove past me twice was gone. Then I waited, doors locked, for 10 minutes in pitch dark before driving home, intentionally going in circles on the way. For those saying he's a criminal on the loose, close but no cigar, I saw the guy's face on the news a few weeks after this. He was picked up on human charges. That taught me to always listen to my gut when it says no. Story 4. I have some serious unresolved issues from my past that I'm working through, so I'm not in a good headspace for a romantic relationship. I usually tell people this up front when I'm setting boundaries for a casual relationship. I once begrudgingly went on a date with a nice guy who started shaming me for dating with an unhealthy mindset and repeatedly asking me if I had been hurt physically, all in the middle of a crowded restaurant. I left as soon as I could after telling him it wasn't going to work out. The next day, he showed up in my workplace and made a nuisance of himself outside, constantly asking passersby to tell me to come out. This went on for a while until I finally left the building and he handed me a proposal of how to fix my issues based on what he had Googled. He also gave me a bunch of nonsense about how we could start a relationship. Throughout the entire interaction, he kept calling me a broken individual, used patronizing language, refused to listen to anything I said, and accused me of trying to make things difficult and cause a scene. I decided that politeness wasn't necessary with him, so I took a restraining order against him. He then spent months trying to convince our mutual acquaintances that I was a drama queen with severe mental problems. I told my best friend about this, and she said, "You were right to get away from that dude. He clearly had no respect for you or your boundaries, and he was clearly a mean, selfish, narcissistic jerk. Next time, never let yourself be guilted or talked into going out with someone you really don't want to go out with. You don't owe anybody a date just because you exist, period." That incident was one of those instances where the person had asked me out so many times and I take a decent amount of risk with whom I go out, often random strangers, so I thought, why not? Unfortunately, time and time again, it's not random strangers I need to be wary of, but those who linger in the shadows of my everyday life. Not that I have nefarious people in my life, but sometimes you let your guard down too quickly because someone's a bit more familiar or common in your circle, even though you know very little about them. Yikes, I'm so glad she dodged a bullet there. To everyone out there, if you ever think your partner is a control freak dictator, leave before he builds a wall around you. Story 5. Back in high school, there was this nice guy who had a major crush on me. He wasn't exactly subtle about it, and right from the get-go, he had me feeling pretty uneasy. This guy would ask me out multiple times a day, always right in front of my buddies who weren't much help because they kept egging me on to give him a chance. I was the new kid in school, and they'd been pals with him since they were back in elementary school. No matter how many times I turned him down, he assumed it was because I was seeing someone else, so he started spreading rumors that I was cozying up with other boys at school, which was far from the truth because I had zero interest in dating any of the boys in that high school. Every time I tried to get him to knock it off, he and everyone else nearby, for that matter, would brush it off as a joke and tell me to chill out. The climax of the drama unfolded during my junior year's homecoming dance. He was a senior, and it was his last hurrah at homecoming. As it turns out, the day before the dance, he told one of my friends that he'd asked me to be his date, and according to him, I'd said yes. Except he never asked me, and I never had any intention of going to the dance. My friend got all excited for him and even went over to his place on the big day to help him prep. She also spilled the beans to all our friends, so everyone thought I was his date. Mind you, no one actually checked with me about it, so this was all happening behind my back. He even told everyone that my parents were going to drop me off, so he and my friends patiently waited outside for me. They waited for 3 whole hours. Whenever my friend suggested he come inside and that I wasn't coming, he'd start tearing up and say, "Just give me 5 more minutes." So naturally, I showed up at school on Monday, and everyone was steaming mad at me. None of my friends would even look at me, and I spent 3 days eating lunch all by my lonesome, utterly bewildered about what was happening. Finally, some girl I'd never talked to before asked me why I'd stood the poor guy up. I couldn't take it anymore, so I approached the guy when he was on his own and asked him what on earth he'd done. His response? He burst into hysterical laughter and said, "If you agree to go out with me, I'll set the record straight." I never spoke to that guy again. It did some serious damage to my friendships because they thought I was heartless for not giving a chance to the guy they thought was a real sweetheart. Story 6. A close friend of mine was moving across country. We had known each other for a while, and while he was openly gay and I was not, we were still good friends. He had his going away party at a gay bar in Austin. I'm comfortable with my heterosexuality, so I went along to have a few drinks, dance a little, and go home with my girlfriend, who came to the party with me. Well, we got there, and about 20 minutes in, she got a text that her friend's sister had been in a bad car accident, so she left to go help her friend. I decided I'd stay for another hour or so before heading home. I was at the bar, having a drink, and I started to feel tired, so I went outside to call an Uber. As I was outside, one guy from the party group who I didn't know at all asked what was going on, and I told him I was leaving. He was like, "Dude, I live right by you. I'll drop you off." I didn't think about it at the time, but I had no clue where I lived because we had barely been introduced at the party. I got in his car, and as we turned the corner, he put his hand on my leg. I immediately felt uncomfortable and asked him to stop. He ignored me and kept driving. When we came up to a stoplight, I tried to open the door, but it was locked. He still wouldn't look at me, and by this point, I was very scared. I realized that I had a window breaker on my keychain, so I pulled it out and broke the passenger side window. I then crawled out of the car and ran to safety. The man drove off. Later, I found out that the man was in a stolen car and no one knew him at the party. He had just started associating with our group early on, and I thought he was part of the party. It was a scary experience, but I'm glad I was able to escape unharmed. Story 7. I was in high school and working the night shift at a gas station, sweeping the floor as usual. The door opened and I heard the bell, so I looked up and made eye contact with a guy. I can't explain what was going on in the guy's head, but it was like he thought he was in a slow-motion movie. He reeled back in surprise, gasping and widening his eyes as he stared at me. I'm not the type of person to notice these things in other people, but I felt like I was reading a scene from Twilight in my head. I went behind the checkout counter, and he grabbed his Red Bull or whatever. He kept looking at me in shock and shaking his head like he was trying to psych himself up for something. Ladies, you know that feeling when you know someone wants to talk to you, but you're trying to play it cool? This went on for like 20 minutes, and I couldn't get anything done because I was waiting for this dude to check out. Anyway, he walks up to the checkout counter super dramatically. I check him out, he stares the whole time, and finally sighs, saying, "I never expected to see such a beautiful woman at a gas station. This is fate. You shouldn't be working here. I just can't help myself. I have to ask you on a date." I said, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." He looked seriously enraged. He clenched his fists and gave me this overly dramatic, scary look. He grabbed his stuff and stormed out of the door. He moved his car so the bright headlights were facing the front of the store and sat there until the next customer came, probably an hour later. Honestly, I wasn't too scared. I was just like, really? I just wanted to finish my list of duties at this crappy gas station and go home. But this guy concocted a bizarre dream scenario in his head, and somehow that was my fault. Bro thinks those icy stares and cold, cringy lines he read in teen fiction really worked in real life. Main character vibes right there. So if you're ready to give these nice guys a reality check, click that like button and subscribe to my channel. Story 8. He was considered one of the nicest guys in high school. He was always bubbly and kind to everyone, loved to help people out, and gave great hugs. Everyone compared him to a teddy bear. Because we were in almost all the same classes, we would chat on the phone about homework and projects. Then we started to become friends and would talk about our goals after high school, life, our families, and other teenage drama. Slowly, things started to change and he showed more of a dark and controlling side. One night at my house, he confessed that he liked me, and I told him that I didn't feel the same way. He kept pressing me for a reason, accusing me of being superficial. I told him again and again that I didn't think we were compatible, but he kept up with the accusations until I forcibly asked him to leave. As he was standing at my door putting on his shoes, he looked at me and said, "I wonder what it's like." I asked, "What it's like?" He said, "To kiss you." He then grabbed me by the arms and pulled me in slowly while I was saying, No, I don't think this is a good idea," and struggling to pull away, but his grip was too strong, and finally he forcibly kissed me. Honestly, for someone who claimed to be my best friend, it was a complete betrayal of trust. I still feel disgust and sadness when I think about it. And this is just one of many things that happened where he exerted power over me before I cut him out of my life. Sigh. Story 9. There's this nice guy from college. We're talking trench coat and fedora, fingerless gloves, pathetically sleazy smile, the whole package, in a tropical country at that, who kept trying to talk to me even as I was clearly trying to do my homework. Now, I was okay with multitasking. I could do homework and listen and respond to him, but he wouldn't have it. Hey, Tuna, you know what? I really hate it when women ignore me. Yes, not people. He said women specifically. I was dumbfounded but also really offended, so I shot back that I was listening to him, even if I wasn't looking at him. No, but when I'm talking to someone, I want them to look at me. A friend overheard this and went off on him faster than I did. He left me alone after that. Not as terrible as the other answers here, but that was my first real taste of it. Story 10. I was at a party when this so-called nice guy showed up. He's an old friend of the host, and he's got this reputation for being all friendly on the surface, but in real life, he's just a complete jerk, especially when it comes to his attitude toward women. I tried to keep my distance from him because I'd finally had some pretty unsettling encounters with him. In the past, when he had a bit too much to drink, he noticed my efforts to avoid him and wouldn't give me any space. So when he decided to head outside for a quick bathroom break in the bushes, I saw my chance and hurried into the spare bedroom, shutting the door behind me, hoping to catch my breath for a moment. But wouldn't you know it, not even 5 minutes later, the door swings wide open and he exclaims, "Hey there, buddy, I was looking for you." He barges in and locks the door behind him. My stomach sinks, then plops down behind me and starts rubbing my shoulders rather aggressively. He asks, "Why are your shoulders so uptight, buddy?" After a moment of awkwardness, I stand up and say, "Dude, this is seriously uncomfortable. I'm out of here." He responds with, "You find massages uncomfortable? No wonder you're single." I can't fathom what it takes for someone to be so oblivious to their own cringeworthy behavior. Well, looking back, I think oblivious people don't usually lock the door behind them. But this guy, he knew exactly what he was doing. Story 11. He let me sleep over because I lived an hour away and we'd been drinking. But then he pulled the old, "You're really lucky I'm a nice guy. Most guys would take advantage of you in this situation, but I'm not. You should be grateful." I had known him for a few months as a platonic friend, and I had made it clear on several occasions that I wasn't interested in anything more. But his comment made me realize that he never saw me as a friend. To him, I was just a potential conquest. I was disgusted and hurt, but I didn't want to make a scene. I simply said goodnight and went to bed. The next morning, I packed my things and left without saying a word. I'm glad I'm not friends with him anymore. He's a manipulative creep, and I don't want anything to do with him. I think that's the nice guy approach. They try so hard to convince others that they respect women, when in reality they're just thirsty white knights. Story 12. A self-proclaimed nice guy wouldn't leave me alone while I was working at a music venue. He kept saying it was a shame I had a boyfriend because I was so pretty and he treated me right. He also overtipped me, which was weird and uncomfortable. I was busy helping other customers, so he had to yell all of this time. I eventually told him to buzz off, but he just stared at me all night from the crowd, waving at me. After the lights went up, he came over and launched into his "It's a shame you have a boyfriend" bit again. I gave him some excuse and got away. I don't understand why people come to shows just to creep on people who are working. It's so disrespectful. I've been creeped out on before, but never by someone who thinks they're better than my boyfriend. I can't believe this guy wasn't fired, even after he took pictures of me without my permission. It's also funny to me how people assume that every boyfriend is a jerk who treats his girlfriend badly. And yet, they're the ones who objectify women and treat them like trophies. Story 13. I met a guy at a gathering at a mutual friend's place and ended up chatting with him all night. I didn't think much of it at the time, but a couple of weeks later he called my house. I never gave him any last name or phone number, so he must have gotten my information from my friend. He started showing up at my house at weird times, sometimes with his equally creepy sister. He would often come over without calling ahead of time, and he would stay for hours even if I asked him to leave. I was starting to feel really uncomfortable and unsafe, but I didn't know what to do. Fast forward a few years, I had moved out of my parents' house by then, but he still managed to find me. He showed up at their doorstep one night, and my dad answered the door. My dad just told him that I wasn't home, without mentioning that I didn't live there anymore. Later that night, my dad let the dog out to do his business before bed. The dog disappeared into the backyard chasing something. My dad thought it was a skunk or something, but then he heard the gate of the neighbor's fence open and close quickly. He realized that the dog had chased a person out of the backyard. My old bedroom window faced the backyard, so I think it was probably the creep. Our dog was such a good girl. She was the sweetest dog I've ever known. She wasn't mean at all, and she would have probably just annoyed the creep for petting. She loved making friends with everyone and everything. Shame on you, Adam. Nothing sets off creep alert sirens quite like good old-fashioned stalking. Story 14. I thought he was my friend. I stayed at his apartment when I was visiting his town. He slept in the couch and I slept in the bedroom. Late at night, he started making inappropriate comments about how he had hidden the bedroom key and that I should get ready for him. I spent the whole night awake, terrified. In the morning, I packed my things and wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let me go without a goodbye kiss. He blocked the door so I couldn't get out. I tried to act calm and somehow managed to squeeze past him without getting kissed, but it was a terrifying experience. That was the end of our friendship. Story 15. We were friends. Then one day, he decided to surprise me at my house so we could watch Jessica Jones together. Unfortunately, I was out doing volunteer work that day, so I wasn't home. He decided to wait for me outside my house, thinking it would be romantic, but he ended up waiting for 5 hours. When I got home, it was already 8 p.m. and dark. I asked him what he was doing there, and he said, I was waiting for you so we could watch Jessica Jones. We sat down and watched an episode, but it was so awkward. The silence was deafening. And to make matters worse, the episode had that intimate scene with Luke Cage. After it ended, I just said, I'm gonna go home now. I felt bad for him, but it was so uncomfortable. I think you can blame movies and TV shows for this type of behavior. They make it seem like geeky, socially awkward guys can get with whoever they want just by showing that they're committed to being with someone. But that's not how the real world works. That guy waited for love like a thirsty man in the desert, but all he got was a mouthful of sand. If you've made it this far, then you need to watch People Who Had Their Guts to Ask Their Crush Out. What happened? Story 3 is so hilarious, you won't want to miss it. See you there.